be here with you to live stream a program that will be discussing political issues, social issues, economic issues, and issues of social justice once a week, Wednesday evening from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Pacific time. At 7:15, we welcome phone calls from the audience and we'll involve you in the discussion. Extensive discussion. People from all points of view can call in at the number on the screen, 562-438-0505. So let's get started with the topic of the evening. We're going to be talking about the momentous week that we had after the election. Since last Wednesday, we had tremendous events occurring. We had President-elect Trump assuming his position as president-elect and then starting to appoint some of his top officials in the White House, as well as considering some cabinet appointments. The most recent appointment consideration was Nikki Haley, the governor of South Carolina, being considered for possibly Secretary of State. Rudy Giuliani wants that position as well, and he's being considered as well for that. And there are a few other people in consideration for the official cabinet positions. But the most interesting, and to some people a bit alarming, appointment was that of Steve Bannon as in a new position created basically for him called Chief Strategist. In addition to that, he had a more traditional title, and that is Chief Counsel of the President as well. So Chief Strategist for President-elect Donald Trump and Chief Counselor to the President, which means he could be a chief advisor in the White House, in the West Wing, seeing the President every day, maybe even several times a day, to give him advice on how to proceed in strategizing how to accomplish his goals as President. What kinds of policies would be possible to implement or to work for, which ones should be the priorities, and how it would go about doing it, what kind of tactics to use to do this. That would be the purview of Steve Bannon. Now, Steve Bannon is a person who is well known to many quarters, depending on if you were involved in politics or not. Steve Bannon in August was appointed by Donald Trump, candidate Donald Trump, to run his campaign, to take over and to run the campaign efficiently and in a sense with media savvy, because Steve Bannon is, if anything else, he's a media man. He got a degree in business from Harvard Business School, and he also went on to become a Wall Street broker, was successful there. He started investing in media and making movies and documentary movies as well, especially documentaries praising people like Ronald Reagan and others on the right side of the spectrum. And he became very famous and financially successful that way. And most recently, he became the chair of Breitbart News. Breitbart News is an extremely popular website now on the far right of the spectrum. It has become a forum for what's called the alt-right, which is a group of right-wing theorists and theoreticians and activists and those connected to some of the more right-wing groups in this country, political groups who have been active now on Twitter, on Facebook and other kinds of social media also. And Breitbart News was basically their forum. That was their place where their news got to be put out. The headlines were quite shocking at times. And Steve Bannon turned Breitbart News into an extremely viable, financially viable outfit on the internet as an internet news website. So with Breitbart News experience, Steve Bannon has now been appointed as to be the chief strategist for President-elect Donald Trump in the White House, as well as the chief counselor to the president, or chief advisor to the President Donald Trump, President-elect Donald Trump. So this is what we have going on, folks, and this is a tremendously momentous week because of these developments. Now, why are we so concerned about this? Because if you look at Steve Bannon's past, of his record, what he's been doing in recent years especially, he's been very involved with pushing the alt-right viewpoint and movement and getting people to know about that point of view on the internet, on his website, as well as other areas. And now he's gotten this president-elect elected by being very active and as a leader, campaign chairman actually, for the last 3 months of the Donald Trump campaign, successfully culminating in a victory with an electoral college vote victory, despite the fact that Donald Trump actually won about 1 million less popular votes. That's votes of the American voters, 1 million less votes than Hillary Clinton. The way our system is set up with the electoral college, the person with the most amount of electoral votes wins the election, not the popular votes. And we're going to talk about that also perhaps today for some time, or maybe a little later, maybe next week. But right now, I've also been authoring, in fact, it's completed, a proposed constitutional amendment to abolish the Electoral College. I first wrote that amendment along with Professor Michael Flores, a history professor at Cypress College, back in 2008, when we saw how egregious it was that back in 2000, the candidate Al Gore, who won the popular vote, lost the electoral vote to George Bush, and George Bush became president, even though he had a minority of the popular vote. This happened again now in 2016. So in 16 years, we've had it happen twice. And we resurrected the 2008 amendment that was written by myself as the initiator and Michael Flores, Professor Flores. And together we have now relaunched that amendment to see if members of Congress will pick it up and sponsor it. It takes a 2/3 vote of the House and a 2/3 vote of the Senate to sponsor this amendment, to put it up as a proposal. Once that vote is taken and 2/3 of them support it, it becomes an officially proposed amendment and goes to the next stage, and that is the stage of ratification. Ratification of the amendment will take place within 7 months or so, and if it's ratified by 3/4 of the states, that's 38 states out of 50, it becomes part of the Constitution. Our amendment is very simple. So, we can look at that amendment later on, but it basically says that the electors will no longer be the ones who nominate the president and elect him, the electoral college members, but instead it's going to be a direct election of the voters from each state throughout the states of the president of the United States. A direct popular vote election is what this amendment calls for. And it's very well written. It's been looked over by legal advisors, and it looks like a good amendment that could work as long as the Congress picks it up and gets the states to ratify it. In which case, in that case, if there was no electoral college and the popular vote, the people of America get to decide who their president will be, we would have had President Al Gore, not President George W. Bush, and we would have had President Hillary Rodham Clinton instead of President Donald Trump. So that's quite important ramifications for this kind of a change. But let's talk a little bit before we have people call in, about the New York Times editorial that came out, which I'd like to read directly from to you, from the New York Times of November the 15th, 2016. The editorial board says, "Anyone holding out hope that Donald Trump would govern as a uniter, that the racism, sexism, and anti-Semitism and nativism of his campaign were just poses to pick up votes should think again. In an ominous sign of what the Trump presidency will actually look like, the president-elect on Sunday appointed Steve Bannon as his chief White House strategist and senior counselor, an enormously influential post. Many, if not most Americans had never heard of Mr. Bannon before this weekend, and for good reason. He has kept a low profile, even after taking over Mr. Trump's campaign in August. Before that, he worked as the executive chairman of the Breitbart News Network, parent company of the far-right website Breitbart News, which under Mr. Bannon became what the Southern Poverty Law Center has called a, in quote, white ethno-nationalist propaganda mill, end of quote. That's not my words, that's the words of the Southern Poverty Law Center. New York Times goes on to say, Mr. Bannon himself seems fine with that description, telling Mother Jones, magazine, Mother Jones, last summer, that Breitbart was now, in quote, the platform for the alt-right, end of quote, a loosely organized group of mostly young men who believe in white supremacy, oppose immigration, feminism, and multiculturalism, and delight in harassing Jews, Muslims, and other vulnerable groups by spewing shocking insults on social media. The New York Times goes on to say, to scroll through Breitbart headlines is to come upon a parallel universe where black people do nothing but commit crimes, immigrants rape native-born daughters, and feminists want to castrate all men. Here's an example. In quote, well, actually, it's not a quote. It is a quote. Hoisted high and proud, the Confederate flag proclaims a glorious heritage. This headline, says the New York Times, ran 2 weeks after a white supremacist massacred 9 black churchgoers in Charleston, South Carolina. Another headline, birth control makes women unattractive and crazy. A third headline, Gabby Giffords, the gun control movement's human shield, end of quote. These are some of the headlines of the Breitbart. Let me just go ahead and continue with the story here from the New York Times, their op-ed piece actually. If you don't find the headlines alarming, check the reader comments, or take a look at who's rejoicing over Mr. Bannon's selection. The white nationalist Richard Spencer said on Twitter that Mr. Bannon was in quote, the best possible position, end of quote, to influence policy, since he would, in quote, not get lost in the weeds of establishment Washington. The chairman of the American Nazi Party said the pic showed that Mr. Trump might be for real, in quote, real in quotes. David Duke, former imperial wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, called the choice, in quote, excellent, and said Mr. Bannon was basically creating the ideological aspects of where we're going, end of quote. New York Times goes on to say, Mr. Bannon is in some ways a perplexing figure, a far-right ideologue who made his millions investing in Seinfeld, a former Goldman Sachs banker who has reportedly called himself a Leninist, with a goal to destroy the state, end quote, and bring everything crashing down, end of quote. He has also called progressive women a bunch of dykes, and in a 2014 email to one of his editors, wrote of the Republican leadership, end quote, let the grassroots turn on the hate. Let the grassroots turn on the hate, because that's the only thing that will make them do their duty, end of quote. In New York Times continues, a few conservatives have spoken out against Mr. Bannon. Ben Shapiro, a former Breitbart news editor who resigned in protest last spring, said Mr. Bannon was a, end quote, vindictive, nasty figure, end of quote. Glenn Beck called him a nightmare and a terrifying man, end quote. But most Republican office holders have so far remained silent. Some have dismissed fears about Mr. Bannon. Other Republicans have praised him, like Reince Priebus, the chairman of the Republican National Committee, who Mr. Trump announced as his chief of staff on Sunday, and who said Mr. Bannon could not be such a bad guy because he served in the Navy and went to Harvard Business School. Some saw the pick of Mr. Priebus as evidence that Mr. Trump would not be leaning so much on Mr. Bannon. But don't be fooled by Mr. Priebus' elevated title. In the press release announcing both hires, Mr. Bannon's name appeared above Mr. Priebus's. In a little more than 2 months, Mr. Bannon and his toxic ideology will be sitting down the hall from the Oval Office. Now, this is not my words, folks. This is the New York Times. So whether or not you agree with the New York Times or find them credible, that's up to you to decide and to investigate this story. But this is definitely information that people should be looking at carefully and trying to find out what the H is going on in our country right now. We know that we had a seismic election result, a person who had the background that other candidates never had before, a populist, right-wing populist coming in from the outside, a billionaire businessman has got elected on a message they'd like to keep jobs in America, bring back the jobs that are lost for the working people of America. In fact, his message has some parallels to progressive Democrats' message who said that we should not have free trade and fair trade. We should not block TPP and stop it. We should revoke NAFTA. And Trump has actually said these things. That's how he appealed to the people in the Rust Belt states of Michigan, of Ohio, Pennsylvania, and even Florida, where he was put over the top by the folks who have suffered job losses and downsizing. So this is a very serious time. What President-elect Trump was going to do with this country is of great concern to all of us. If he is going to create jobs and stick to his platform of uniting America, as he said, he wanted to be the president of all Americans, of people of all religions and faiths, and of people of all ethnic backgrounds, then he should focus on that and not use divisive language and not appoint people who would be divisive and who really create fear in the hearts of many Americans. So let me look here and define for you what the alt-right movement is. This it's been defined by the Southern Poverty Law Center as a set of far-right ideologies, groups, and individuals whose core beliefs is that white identity, in quote, white identity, is under attack by multicultural forces using, in quote, political correctness and social justice to undermine white people and their civilization, end of quote. Twitter has suspended the accounts of leading alt-right leaders just today, I think, or yesterday, Richard Spencer included. Richard Spencer is the National Policy Institute, and alt-right, in fact, their Twitter account was also suspended, along with Richard Spencer. He's the president of the National Policy Institute, which is an alt-right white nationalist think tank of which Spencer is the president. So these are some very serious times when these things are happening, and we need to be aware. Those of us who care about this country, who want to keep America inclusive and to honor its heritage as a nation of immigrants, and to look at the diversity of our population, ethnic diversity, our cultural diversity, our intellectual diversity, all of these things has such strength, not as weaknesses, as members of the alt-right will say. So we need to speak up, and we need to be very firm about it, that we will not tolerate intolerance and racism and hatred from any quarters, including from any parts of our government. So that is what I have to say today, and I believe it could be almost 7:15, so it's time to take phone calls in a few minutes. So as soon as you folks start calling in, I'll stop talking and have you talk. and tell us what you think about all this. And give us your views, give us your concerns, tell us what solutions you'd like to see take place in the next few weeks as we make this transition from the Obama administration to the Trump administration. So if any of you would like to call in, go ahead and get ready to dial in, 562-438-0505, 562-438-0505. And tonight we've got time out to go all the way till 8 o'clock. So it'll be a 1 hour show from now on Wednesday nights from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock. 7:15 will be call-in time. Let me ask you this. What is your view of our country? What is your vision for America? What is your definition of the United States of America? I see the United States of America as a nation of ideas, a nation built on ideas. The idea that all human beings are created equal, endowed with the natural rights by the Creator, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and government has to guarantee those rights. Let's talk about it. We've got someone on the phone calling in. Let's see who this is and bring in the audience. Yes, good evening. This is Peter Mathews. You've connected. Let's hear from you. Who's speaking, please?
This is Brett Covey. I'm from Long Beach, California.
Hello, Mr. Brett Covey. How are you?
Oh, just fine.
What's on your mind today? Another call is coming in. Shall I just put you on hold for 1 second and come right back to you?
You can do that, yeah.
Let's see if I can do this now. I'll put you on hold right here. Good. Yes, good evening. Peter Mathews. Who's calling, please? Hello? Yes, who's calling, please? Hello? Hello, Brett? Are you there? Hello, Brett. Are you still there?
I'm still here.
Okay, yes, another call was coming. Couldn't pick it up, though. But let's continue, okay. Brett. They'll call back, and I've got let me let them know if they're watching us right now. To call back in about 5 minutes, and then we'll go ahead and continue with them and continue with all the calls that hopefully will come in tonight. Go right ahead, Brett, please.
Okay, well, you just put some meat with my potatoes here. You're talking about white identity and everything. That really, that really gets my goat.
It gets your goat, you said. Interesting.
Yeah, because, now I can really understand what these protesters are out there and about. It's not just about Trump, it's about his ideas. And it's just ridiculous. Let me get this headphone away from me so that I don't get the feedback. I'm hearing myself.
I hear you very clearly. Go right ahead.
Yeah. So I just wanted to call in and express my concern about that. It's these two guys that you're talking about, Spencer and
Bannon.
I'm sorry?
Bannon.
Yeah, okay.
Spencer and Bannon, yes. But Spencer has not been appointed by Trump. Let's make that clear. Spencer is still out there putting forth his ideas of white supremacy, but he's not in the official Trump group in terms of being an advisor, whereas Bannon is the top advisor to Donald Trump right now. He's been appointed the chief counselor of the president and also chief strategist. How do you like that? Whatever that means. We never had a chief strategist position in the White House before, but he'll be there every day. So yes, yeah. These two men, and Brett, you're saying it's the ideas of Donald Trump that people are concerned about, not just Donald Trump, the protesters.
Yeah, the people that he hires express the ideas that he has. I mean, why would he bring these two guys in who are notable white supremacists? I mean, unless he shared their views.
That's a great question, Brett. It's a very important question to pose to the public to research.
And I have to say, it makes me quite angry.
What makes you angry about it, Brett?
It makes, this bit about white identity. I consider myself, an American first, and I do have a heritage going back. Unfortunately, I'm not so mixed. I'm mostly Swedish, but I do have Cherokee Indian and a lot of other mixes, and I just don't believe in that.
As many Americans do. Most of us are in that category of having ethnic diversity and mixtures throughout our history. We had people from Ireland and from Italy and other places intermarrying with each other and mixing, and just it's other ethnicities as well. Asian Americans, African Americans, Latinos, Native American Indians.
Right.
This country is supposed to be the melting pot, figuratively and in some sense, literally.
Well, yeah.
Yes.
White, and this is how the human race has always been.
Yeah, that's right. Throughout history, there's been no really purity, so to speak.
Yeah, and so there's this division here in the United States. Been a long-standing division between black people and white people. If it wasn't black people, maybe it would have been Mexican people, or specifically people of color being identified as being different or inferior races. I mean, I've never heard of I guess there could be black people that identify themselves as black supremacists or Muslim supremacists.
Well, supremacy ideology actually is worldwide in many different ethnic and racial groups. For example, the Japanese fascists in World War II, their whole militarism was based on the ideology of supremacy, of Japanese being supreme race of all of the world, not just of Asia, but all of the world. And Japanese leaders, the militaristic leaders, conquered China and raped and pillaged the Philippines and other countries, Korea, and always dehumanized the people that they defeated and claimed themselves to be superior racially. So this is not just a phenomenon of European ancestry. Supremacy exists in all cultures and different cultural settings and within different cultural groups of all colors in the world. So it's a very dangerous ideology that can be quite universal, dangerous in the sense that it creates a lot of instability, a lot of hatred, and frankly, it is not based on science or on rational reason in terms of knowing that all human beings scientifically have been proven to have come from one place, one source. Where was human race born? The human race.
Yeah.
Africa.
Africa. Yeah, I think the bed of the human race came from Ethiopia.
That's right, in Africa. And so we spread out around the world, and as we traveled and the climate was different and changed, we started adjusting in terms of the way our development of our skin color and our features to protect against the environment. And through intermarriage in local groups, we developed certain features, and skin color came out through the need to protect against the sun in the sunny areas and to open up our skin to vitamin D synthesis by the sun by having lighter skin in the northern parts of the globe. Brett, another call is coming in. I'm wondering what I'm doing wrong here. This phone is new. And do I just push flash right now to get the other person? Okay, let me try that a second.
All right.
Hello, good evening. Who's speaking, please?
This is Tony Castro.
Oh, Mr. Tony Castro, could you hold on 1 minute, please? I'm on the other line with Brett Covey, and I'll have him sign off here so we can get some time in with you.
Yes, sir.
I'll be right back, sir. I'll be right back. This is very interesting. Hello, Brett. Hello, Brett.
Hello.
Yeah, that's Tony. Mr. Tony Castro is calling. May I go ahead and finish up your thought, and we'll go to Tony Castro to make sure we get everyone in here.
Yeah, well, I'm finished with the thought. I think other people want to express themselves, and I think I got my point across.
You certainly did.
What Tony has to say.
Great. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you a little later.
Okay.
Bye. Hello, Tony?
Yes.
Yes, you're on the line. You're on the air. Go right ahead, sir. Tell us your thoughts about what we've been discussing tonight. Have you had a chance to watch or listen to the show?
Yeah, I was watching the show since 7 o'clock since you went on, and my thoughts on Donald Trump is he's definitely racist. Donald Trump, I think he's definitely 100% racist. And he's even said that Mexico is sending over their worst.
Mm-hmm.
And that all Mexicans are rapists or murderers. And I'm actually Mexican. My dad is from Mexico, born in Mexico. I was born here in Orange County, in the city of Orange, and my mom was born in Orange.
Okay.
But my dad was born in Mexico, and he actually owns property and pays property taxes and is retired from a union laborer's construction job where he paid income tax for 30 years, and he's never had a criminal record, never even been pulled over by the police. Mm-hmm. And he's a permanent resident. His decision instead of a citizen wanted to be a resident, just a permanent resident. But that goes to show one example of how one of millions of examples of how Donald Trump's his opinions are jaded, and it's just verifying how racist he is. He says I saw during the debate, Hillary had said that it came up where Donald Trump actually told the management company of his condos that he owned not to rent or to sell or to rent to African Americans.
And that case was settled out of court, by the way. There was a settlement. You're right. He was sued, and instead of going to court, he settled financially with that charge, against that charge, about being discriminatory against African Americans. Allegations.
He got endorsed by the KKK. I want to remind everybody that Donald Trump was endorsed, and he did accept the endorsement. He accepted it.
That was the KKK newspaper. Are you speaking of the newspaper endorsement more closer to the election, or previous endorsement?
It must be the newspaper, but it's all.
Yeah, I believe he rejected, formally speaking, Tony, formally speaking, but I believe formally speaking, he rejected that newspaper endorsement formally. But here's something else about his statement. You mentioned the statement about immigrants from Mexico. You know, he said that the undocumented, he calls them illegal immigrants from Mexico, have come here in the millions. And he says that most of them are criminals and rapists, and there are a few, I suppose there are a few good people among them. Can you believe that? That is a stereotyping. It is not based on fact. It is a racist statement in a sense, because he's putting a whole category of ethnic people together and vilifying them. That is absolutely detrimental to our country.
The way he's making it sound indirectly is that Mexico has some kind of organization, and they're organizing and sending us their worst.
All right, he said they're not sending us their best people.
My mom's family comes from Mexico, and my dad's born directly from Mexico, and he's a prominent member of the community, owns property, and he's paying taxes, sales taxes.
That's right.
And income tax for 30 years. My mom as well, and also here I am, also a prominent member of the community, who's also a business owner.
What is it that you do? You're a business owner? You said you're a business owner, right? Go ahead. Tell the public.
Yes. Yeah. And I want to mention one thing, that America is proudly a nation built of immigrants.
That's right. That's right.
And so I don't know what that means. Everybody should go back, and I heard that Donald Trump says he's going to pay, if anybody wants to go back, he'll pay for it. I think Trump Airlines, is a rumor or something like that. He'll pay if you want to get deported, he'll pay for it. Did you hear about that?
I've heard rumors about that. I haven't seen the documentation on that, but I've heard that. Yes.
I've heard it. Yeah.
And that's totally ridiculous, because first of all, he also said something that he can never carry out. He's not going to be able to build a wall. He's not going to be able to deport 11 million hardworking undocumented workers in America. That's just not going to happen. He doesn't have the task force. Congress won't let him do it. But he said that to win the primaries, and that's the despicable part of that kind of a campaign, when you just say things to get votes.
Donald Trump wants to build a wall, but I don't know what he's going to call it, the Great Wall of America. But I thought that America was about unity and bringing walls down and bringing people together.
Absolutely. That's what I would see America as, Tony.
Because, that goes to show that anything is possible with democracy. Anything. Mm-hmm. And anybody can ethics and values now, and morals are out the window, I guess, now that Donald Trump is in office.
And that's a total tragedy, Tony. That was building up for quite a few decades, the throwing out of morality, and especially ethics, which is universal morality, not based on religion, but on human beings' values. Ethics have been thrown out the window in the last few decades of our campaigns. It's become money in politics, as I have in my book, Dollar Democracy with Liberty and Justice for Some. The subtitle is How to Reclaim the American Dream for All. But the main title, Dollar Democracy, indicates that our political system has become bought and paid for by billionaires and millionaires, such as Trump and others, who's a billionaire, and then Clinton is a multimillionaire. These people buy the elections, and they get favors in return from the elected officials in terms of corporate loopholes, in terms of policy toward immigrants. Whatever the donors want, quite often they're going to get, and that's a problem. That's a big problem. Go ahead, Tony.
When you're talking about corporations, there's loopholes.
Yes, corporate loopholes.
Have you heard of corporate welfare? Is that what you're talking about? Where at the end of the fiscal year, these large corporations end up paying almost or close to or $0 in taxes.
Oh, it's worse than that, Tony. I've got a number of 40 corporations in the table in my book in the last 2 pages of my book, 40 corporations out of hundreds that I've listed, there are hundreds of them that exist, that paid no income tax in the year 2012 while making billions and hundreds of millions of dollars in profit, were able to write off all that income was able to legally be able to be written off because of legal corporate loopholes passed by Congress and made into law. And those companies, for example, paid nothing, and on top of not paying any taxes legally, they received, let me just finish, Tony, 1 second, let me finish my thought.
Okay.
While not only not paying any taxes legally because of the corporate tax loopholes passed by Congress, they actually received corporate welfare, meaning they got money written, checks written to them by the government through Congress. They wrote them checks to give them what's called corporate welfare to help them promote their businesses around the world, to publicize their businesses. They got money, our taxpayer money, given to them through the U.S. Congress and the federal government, which was corporate welfare. So companies ended up getting a negative tax burden. A negative tax burden they paid. Like one company had a negative 40% tax burden, which meant it got back $420 million while paying zero income tax on $1.06 billion in profit. Those numbers are mathematical. They can confuse people. But the fact is these companies are not only not paying taxes, they're getting welfare, corporate welfare. And to me, that's the dollar democracy. But let's not get away from this issue of immigration, of what this nation's essence is about.
I was watching something on YouTube as well, and I totally agree. I'm glad that you mentioned that about the corporate welfare, because that's something I want to talk about. But I saw something on YouTube about Donald Trump and his Confederate supporters, and they were being interviewed. They were being interviewed, and they were being asked questions such as, "Do you think this Confederate flag is racist?" And we say, and they were being asked questions, "Why are you voting for Trump?" And some of the answers that were given says that he's going to close the borders. He's going to close the borders. He's going to seal them. Nobody else should come in. And they were saying exactly what I was saying about Mexicans being either rapists or murderers, as Donald Trump was saying. And so, but they didn't really have any kind of scientific reason or some kind of rational or reasonable reason. They just had, it seemed like emotional, like they just, almost like he's just got this race.
Okay, let's talk. You've raised a very, very important issue here, and that has to do with what is the cause of undocumented immigrants? What is the cause of undocumented immigrants coming to this country? And they're not coming here for the weather. They're not coming here for the food. We have good food here, but they got good food across the border in other countries as well. And by the way, let's keep this in mind. 65% of the undocumented people who come to America come from south of our border. 35% come from other countries, including Europe and China and other countries that they overstay their visas here, or they come in illegally and stay here. It's not just Mexican Americans or Latinos coming in here illegally. 35% are not from that group. They're from Europe and China and Asia. So let me put this straight. That fact has to be put forward. Secondly, when you look at the people coming from south of the border, especially Mexico, it has to do with free trade policies of NAFTA that was put into place by corporate Democrat Bill Clinton, who was elected back in 1992 with lots of support from big corporations and lobbyists. And not only him, but other Republicans like Phil Graham, the senator from Texas, who was also a corporate Republican, his wife Wendy Graham, a professor of economics, who supported free trade and NAFTA. These folks and a bunch of other Democrats and Republicans bought by corporations, paid for by big business that wanted to take the jobs to a cheap labor country like Mexico. These politicians voted for NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which allowed several things, Tony. It allowed, first of all, all of the tariffs that are on products crossing three countries, Canada, the United States, and Mexico. It allowed over a period of 15 years, those tariffs will be eliminated, step by step, taken away completely. So now, the goods that are made in Mexico by an American-owned corporation like General Motors, like an automobile built in Mexico, could be brought back across the border here and sold to Americans without any tax on the car. So that means those companies like GM were encouraged to take their factories to a cheap labor country like Mexico, to pay the workers next to nothing there, to exploit them further and drive them into poverty. Another part of this, which drove a lot of Mexicans into poverty and caused many of them to want to come here to America to eke out a living, or to work hard and make a decent living, is this, that under NAFTA, the American big agricultural companies, like the big agribusinesses such as Monsanto and Cargill and the corn producers, were able to dump their corn which is subsidized by the American government. The U.S. government gives the corn producers money to sell their corn around the world for lower prices. So the corn that is GMO corn, genetically modified corn, which is unhealthy, made here in America by these big agribusiness companies, were exported to Mexico and dumped on the Mexican market, driving out the Mexican small corn farmer out of business, Tony. And that small corn farmer, family farmer, was making a good living, raising healthy and natural corn, was driven out of business and by the American corporate sector that dumped their corn there with American government assistance under NAFTA. And that farmer in Mexico had to go looking for work. Where does he go? He goes to the city and finds a job at a maquiladora in a factory that's built by General Motors or some other company and gets paid very little for that. He can't make a living at that factory. So what does he do? Excuse me, Tony, one second. What does he do? He takes that, he comes here. Where does he go? The farmer had a farm. He was supporting his family. Then he's driven into a factory job because of American agribusiness and NAFTA. The factories there, which are American-owned or South Korean-owned, or whatever international corporations are setting up factories, pay the workers next to nothing there. So where does that man come to make a living? Where does he have to come? Not all of them, but some of them come where? Risking their lives. Where do they come?
Right here.
Right here, across the border. So let's talk, Mr. Trump, about the real causes of illegal immigration. And let's not blame the victim. Let's talk about the way to fix that is to bring about fair trade, which would require wages to be raised on all sides of the border, especially matching the wages more carefully. And then we could have fair trade, not free trade.
Has he ever held a political office before?
No.
No. So he just goes straight to the top, just from the bottom to the top, do it from 0 to 60 real quick.
It's billion-dollar democracy. What do you think? You got $1 billion, you get to get elected. You get free airtime on TV because you draw the audience. And the TV makes a lot of money from having a big audience watching you in the primaries.
Did you see him get stunned by Stone Cold? He got stunned. Did you see that video?
No, I didn't.
He was a wrestler. Donald Trump was a wrestler, and he was in a suit and tie, and he had his wig on, and Stone Cold Steve Austin, a wrestler, did the stunner. The stunner move is Stone Cold Steve Austin's signature move, and Donald Trump got stunned by Stone Cold, and he was on a WWF or a
Oh, I know nothing about that, Tony. I'll have to check into it sometime. But let's talk about these issues that are affecting our lives right now. What are we going to do the next several weeks when we're facing this kind of administration? He was elected legitimately. The voters voted for him in the correct states that gave him enough electoral college votes to win. What is the strategy and tactics of those who are concerned about this presidency, who want to keep this country truly great?
He's saying that this country isn't great. Let's make it great again.
Okay.
It's not great.
What is our... Well, some of the problems... Listen, let me tell you something. Some of the problems he raised... Oh, look, Tony, we can't deny this, though. Some of the issues he raised were absolutely correct. The outsourcing of our jobs, which he talked about. He says, I'm going to put tariffs on products coming from China because American companies went to China and they're having unfair trade and bringing back the products here with no tariffs or with very low wages over there. So Trump has captured, galvanized the discontent of the blue-collar workers who lost their jobs. And that is true. He wants to make, he says, America great again by bringing back our jobs or stopping the job loss. You can't deny that. This is one of the weaknesses of the Democratic Party. The corporate Democrats seem to ignore that part of the problem of the working middle class and working poor going downward in America. Instead, they started emphasizing a lot of social issues and neglecting the most fundamental issue, which is economic. If a human being does not have a chance to make a living for himself and his family, all the rest of life becomes despair. And until politicians understand that, they're sitting back and kicking back, drawing their fat salaries of $160,000 to $200,000 a year and even more, fully paid, benefits paid for by the taxpayers, and they're ignoring the pain of the Midwest, the pain of working people, the pain of immigrants who are not making enough, the pain of working Americans who are born here, whose wages have gone down. They've gone down since the 1970s. At least 25% is how much minimum wage is lost in America since 1973, when I was able to make a living in college with minimum wage job time.
Inflation for education has been going up.
And the cost of education, tremendously high, Tony.
Faster than just inflation, overall inflation. And I think it's like maybe 3% inflation every year since
yes.
the 70s or something.
The cost of living keeps going up with inflation, but our wages don't keep up with it. Am I right?
Yeah, and people are talking about they don't want to increase. I've heard conservatives and I've heard them saying that they don't want minimum wage to go up because then it's going to push inflation up. Well, inflation's already gone up, and guess what hasn't gone up?
That's right, minimum wage, correct, or wages.
It's overdue, and it's just falling way behind.
And they should also understand that there needs to be money in the hands of workers. If they don't have money, how are they going to be able to buy the products? Where's the demand going to go if the workers' wages don't go up with inflation? Where's the demand going to go? It's going to go out the window, and you'll have a recession. Am I right?
And you know exactly. And then what's going to happen is it's going to from there, people aren't going to be too happy. It's going to be unsettled. I mean, nowadays you can't even buy a house if you go get a bachelor's degree and get a job even a little bit more than minimum wage. There's not even living wages, minimum wages. You're still under the poverty line, not even a living wage.
Looks like another call coming in, Tony. Everything you've said is really well taken, my friend. You've told a lot of the truth here. Let me just go ahead and get the other caller because we've been on for a while. But
thank you for having me.
Pleasure, anytime. Call back anytime. Thank you. Hello, good evening here with Peter Mathews. Who's calling, please?
Yeah, Peter, this is Frank calling. How's it going?
Yeah, Frank, what's going on? Where are you located, my friend?
Oh, I'm doing some traveling. I'm in Montana right now.
Montana, okay. How's the weather up there?
Weather's getting cold.
A little cold.
A little windy, yeah.
But the air is quite clean, right?
Oh, yes. Very clean. Usually it's just farms, but they don't grow anything but hay for the cows.
Uh-huh.
You know, you might see a house every 3 or 4 miles, so there's huge.
Wow.
Land.
Rural America, where Donald Trump got a lot of his support. Am I right? In the election.
Exactly. Yeah, he got a lot of support from here.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm traveling, what I'm noticing is that all the AM channels, you got all these right-wing Republican talk show hosts. You can only get them. You don't.
Oh, as you're listening to the radio, you find only or mainly AM radio and right-wing talk show hosts. Is that what you just said?
Yes, I don't hear anybody. And once in a while, I catch NPR.
Once in a while, you catch National Public Radio, NPR. Once in a while.
Yeah, once in a while. So they've been brainwashed by these right-wing Republicans that Democratic Party is bad, people in cities are bad, and Washington is bad for the last 30 or 40 years. So they don't have any idea that we do a lot of good things in the city. We're the people that invent things for everyone to enjoy: television, cell phone, automobile, refrigerators, cameras, and all that.
So let me ask you this, Frank. Let me ask you, if you don't mind. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just ask you a question. I know what you're saying exactly about the propaganda spewed out on right-wing radio, talk radio, quite often in these rural areas and small towns in America. But here's the question for you. What have the Democratic Party done to reach out to these folks in the small towns of America, in the rural areas, many of whom are also suffering, and even in the Rust Belt cities like Detroit and Michigan? What has the Democratic Party done to reach out?
They haven't done anything. That's the problem. They think that all the people who live in the rural area are typically Republicans. Well, if you're only getting Republican side of education by these right-wing talk show hosts, a lot of them are lies, then guess what? You're going to be Republicans. They need to come out here and fight equally and talk about the truth, what Democratic Party stands for, and find out what they can do for some of these farmers as well. See how they can improve the lives of the farmers.
Absolutely, because the farmers are extremely important. While only 2% of American workforce is engaged in agriculture, we cannot live without eating, am I right? And it's one of our biggest exports is agriculture. So we need to help these farmers, especially family farmers, Frank. The small family farmer who's been struggling against these big corporate farmers that get subsidies from our government is someone who we really should be helping. And the Democratic Party, any progressive party or group, should be reaching out to the folks that are struggling, that are working hard and not making enough profit or enough money to feed their families. This is something that was of discontent. It fueled the discontent, the wave of discontent that I talk about, a wave election. We just had a wave election in which discontent swept over the whole country and swept Donald Trump into office because of the neglect of the corporate elites.
Yeah, one thing I want to talk about, very important, is that I
studied political science, and I studied German government.
Where did you study, by the way?
At UCLA.
At UCLA, you went to study political science.
So
Okay.
I studied particularly what we call it a period between 1920s and 1940s. They call it Third Reich.
The Third Reich in Germany.
Yeah, Hitler and the rise of Hitler, and then the German society at the time. And a lot of people don't know this, but Hitler got his education. He was, believe it or not, he was just a high school. He was a junior high school dropout. He didn't even finish junior high school.
You said Hitler was a junior high school dropout?
Dropout, yeah. So
for our audience here, okay.
Junior high school education. He didn't even have a high school education.
Oh, you had a junior high school education, you said, but not a high school education.
And the gentleman that you were reading about, the white supremacist, his ideas are basically the same as Hitler's ideas. And Hitler started with a few people, and then eventually, he started back in the 20s. By the time he became a chancellor, he had, still didn't have a majority of the people supporting him, but once he got hold of power in the military, that's when he could implement his ideas without anybody saying anything, because he had the control of the military. And the first thing he did was he got the gypsies and the mentally retarded people. He put them in concentration camps. That was his first thing. And then secondly, he went after Jewish people. First, he made them wear a Star of David. And then he, in 1936, there were 2 nights where he burned down 1,200 synagogues throughout Germany. And then he destroyed Jewish businesses.
Kristallnacht. The Kristallnacht.
They call it Kristallnacht, huh? Yeah, it's a broken glass, they call it. And
Horrible.
then what happened was he basically said to Jewish people, things are not safe for you guys, so we're going to have you transferred to outside the cities, where we're going to keep you in a safe place. He never told them the truth. It was concentration camps. And then the city mayors, like small city mayors, they knew where the Jewish people were living, so they would take those Jewish people, take them to the train station, and then ship them off to the concentration camps.
And that's where the Holocaust ensued.
Holocaust, yeah, because a lot of people participated and helped Hitler, because he couldn't do it by himself, not even with the military. And so we have to fight every step of the way, not allowing our white supremacists to get a foothold.
To get a foothold, especially in the White House, and then also in the government.
Correct.
And anywhere, and in society, yeah.
Every step of the way, we should always point out the truth and logic, but we also need to be very aggressive, and we can't be complacent and allow this person to think, say whatever they want. See, Donald Trump won by saying a lot of lies, and when you ask the Republican voters, what they basically said, well, we know he's not going to do everything he says he's going to do, but we still voted for him. Because what Donald Trump did and what Hitler did was very similar, and exactly the same, I would say, is that Hitler promised all the Germans 2 things. One was jobs, better life, and secondly, he wanted to make Germany proud again.
Okay, but let me ask you this, Frank. Frank, 1 second. That was very clear what you just said. But my question for you then is, how did the German government that was in power between the 2 wars allow this situation to come about, that the German people were so destitute, hungry, and starving, and unemployed?
Right. Yeah, see, here's the thing. Between right after World War I, about 1917, 18, they had a democracy.
Yeah.
And so Hitler came to power democratically, like Donald Trump is. He won his party won a certain amount of seats.
A plurality of the vote. The Nazi Party won a plurality of the vote, right?
Yeah, he won a certain amount of seats, and then he got elected as a
chancellor.
And then he was basically actually appointed by the Bismarck before he died. So even though he came to power in a democracy, he turned it into a dictatorship after he got control of the military and power.
But my question again goes back to how is it the German people lost their economic footing after World War I? Of course, we know the economy was devastated. The Great Depression and the Great Depression hit the world. The Great Depression hit Germany even harder than the United States, right? Would you say it was harder in Germany?
During 1920s, I think Germany had maybe earlier, a little bit earlier than us in they went through they didn't have a depression like we did. They had what they call a hyperinflation.
Hyperinflation.
They had a situation where their money was worth less and less every day. Okay? Another reason that they had this problem was what they call it, they had to repay the
debt, the foreign reparations to the Western powers who had defeated them.
So to France and England and all of that.
Right.
Because they lost World War I.
Yes.
And so Hitler promised them jobs, and then he created jobs. He created infrastructure jobs. He rebuilt his armies, navies, and then what he was doing was he was basically running a deficit, like Donald Trump is going to do. Somebody's saying right now that he's going to have a $4 or $5 trillion deficit with the tax cut and the infrastructure spending and all of that. And then so he did that. So Donald Trump is promising jobs to all of these people who don't have jobs in exchange for whatever it lies that he says.
So would you say? So let's take wind the clock back for a second. Would you say that had not the German economy been in such dire condition and the people suffering so much, that Hitler probably would not have come to power?
Exactly. I write in my book that you have to be very mindful when the economy is in bad shape, because a smart leader or a bad leader can promise jobs in exchange for power, and that's what Donald Trump did. Okay, he tapped into the people who has lost their jobs, or that only one family member is working, or some of them are on disability, or some of them are on unemployment. And so for the last 20 years or so, he figured out via his voters, in exchange he's going to promise them jobs, and then he's going to get the votes and he's going to become president. Okay? And
believe me, there are a lot of people out there who are suffering in those small towns and rural areas, and also in some of the Rust Belt cities where they've lost those jobs, and they just haven't come back. Even whatever jobs were brought in to take place of those jobs that left were jobs that paid half the wage or 2/3 the wage, or they're temporary jobs or part-time jobs, and this does not bring hope to people. And what I would like to know is why did the political establishment, the Democrats and Republicans, over these years allow that to happen?
Say that again?
Why did the political establishment, Democrats and Republicans in power for the last 10 or 15 years, and even up to 30 years, allow that to happen?
Well, the simple reason, these corporations have donated to all these congressmen and senators for their re-election, and in exchange for that, the congressmen and senators would jobs to be shipped from this country. First it went to Japan, then it went to Korea, then it went to Taiwan, then it went to China. You talk about...
And don't forget Mexico. Don't forget Mexico.
Mexico as well.
And Malaysia and Indonesia and a lot of the global south low-wage countries. Am I right?
Correct.
Increasingly. So then I think the politicians have been, in a sense, derelict. I hate to use that word. It's a harsh word, but dereliction of duty. Because the politician's duty... What is the politician's... Wait a minute. What is the Wait, Frank, 1 second. What is the politician's duty? What's their purpose in life? What is supposed to be their duty as a politician, as a political leader?
Their duty is to serve the people.
Exactly.
To make sure that the people are taken care of. That's their job.
Or at least that the opportunity is provided so people can take care of themselves. But opportunity has to be there, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And that's where we didn't, the leaders did not do it right. And you're talking about dollar democracy. You're talking about the topic of my book. Dollar democracy with liberty and justice for some. That's what happened. Yes.
Hillary Clinton didn't point out the fact that the jobs were transferred under both the Republicans and then the Democrats.
That's true.
Both parties are responsible, but not just the Democrats.
No.
And Donald Trump made it sound like Democrats were responsible for it.
Yeah.
But Democrats were the only one who was in favor of shipping jobs to others.
But you know what, Frank? I got a feeling, to be fair, Donald Trump actually, more than any other Republican candidate, even criticized the Republican establishment. He actually wore it as a badge of pride that some of the Republican officials and leaders in the government would not endorse him. He said, I don't need their endorsement. These are people that are part of the problem. They were the ones who helped export our jobs along with the Democrats. He was probably, out of all the Republican candidates in recent history, the most likely to put the blame on both party establishment leaders. Maybe not equally, but to some extent he certainly did not let off the Republican leadership off the hook either.
Yeah.
And that's what appealed to these voters, I think, some of the voters that voted for him.
Well, no, I think that a lot of the voters voted for him. But again, you have to be very careful with this white supremacist
Oh, yes,
group,
absolutely.
because they are the most dangerous.
Yes.
And they're not just dangerous to Democrats, but they're actually dangerous to established Republican Party as well. Because when they come to power, they're going to treat everyone the same way, whether you're an established Republican Party member or the Democratic Party member, because they're going to run the country with an iron fist. They don't care. So, that's what I'm concerned about, is that
Yes.
they're going to make, we could really realistically lead to a war, civil war. This could be the second civil war in this country if we don't take care of these the working people who don't have jobs. We got to create jobs very quickly.
Yes.
And in a situation where we can bring down the support for the white supremacists, then they won't have any leg to stand on.
Very well said. I agree with you. And this is a very dangerous and precarious and critical time we're in. As I mentioned before in one of my other broadcasts, that in the Chinese Mandarin language, there's one character for crisis, the word crisis. But there are two parts to crisis, danger and opportunity. So if we could just overcome the danger and seize the opportunity to go transform the system to the next level, we'll be okay. It's easier said than done, but it can be done. It's going to take a lot of commitment on the part of people who love this country, people of all ethnicities, all religions, and non-religion as well, people who love America as the idea of land of opportunity, of freedom and democracy. The people that love this country for its ideas have to get together and take a strong stand. Frank, what do you suggest?
Well, no, we got to keep continually educating one another and reminding everyone that this white supremacist
is the danger,
wrong,
is a huge danger.
is dangerous,
Yeah.
and continue, because we cannot allow them to speak without opposing them every step of the way. So
Absolutely.
our message will get through, and their message will be drowned out.
That's right, absolutely. And many college campuses, many college campuses are having those educational town hall meetings with students and faculty right now to do exactly what you're talking about, to educate the public on their options, about the dangers that face us, about the fear that people are feeling. Frank, I just saw a poll yesterday that said that 40% of the American public feels very deep fear, anxiety, and also they're very angry as well as what happened with the kind of election results that we had. And they're very, very insecure and uncertain, and they need reassurance that there is a path out of this and path forward that will help save the country.
Yeah, my suggestion to people is that they need to find, like the History channels have education on Third Reich and what they did and all of that, to continuously, so that we know all the details and step-by-step things that Hitler did. And as soon as you see something that is occurring, we need to oppose it. Right?
Yes.
And then we need to stop it. So first thing is that we need to learn about all the things that Hitler did.
Yes, in history,
so
our history, the history of
blindsided
Germany and the
by
world.
that.
Yeah. So we've got to educate ourselves with history and get the details and know how history could repeat itself. And don't forget, George Santayana, the great historian, has said, those who do not remember their history, those who do not remember their history are condemned to repeat it. We could
Would you speak about the Third Reich and how Hitler came to power in the next broadcast, so that we can educate people about this?
That's certainly very possible. Let's talk about it in the programming for next week. But it's about time to sign off, Frank. Thank you so much for your input and your great ideas. So you're in Montana. You're coming back. Where do you live? Down here?
Yeah.
Yeah, you live here in Southern California. Why don't you be careful driving back, okay?
All right. Okay. Talk to you later.
Take care. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, ladies and gentlemen and friends out there, we appreciate you taking part in this 1 hour segment, and we appreciate the phone calls that came in. Anyone else who would like to have joined the conversation can certainly do it next week at 7 p.m. with Peter Mathews on the program Fighting for Social and Economic Justice. Please tune in to next week on Peter Mathews 11, Peter Mathews, Mathews 11. As you know, you can go into live streaming, click on that, and you'll be in with us at 7 p.m. next Wednesday. From 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., the phone calls from the audience begin at 7:15. Thank you so much and good night.